Alrighty, and welcome back. Let's get into pillar 3, leverage. This is one of the, when people come in, makes people the most nervous. It's probably the least understood pillar. So let's get into it. I'm going to hopefully by the end of the video, you have some clarity on when to use leverage and when not to use leverage. So Archimedes, a famous Greek mathematician, he said, give me a lever long enough, I'll move the world. Same thing with finances. Get you enough leverage, you can move the world. And so you'll hear it several times throughout this course. But if you want to get wealthy without using other people's money, quite frankly, you're just taxed at too high a level that you're never going to be able to do it. So you got to combine tax benefits and leverage. These are two of the most powerful pillars. Like, other people's money is the only way to get ahead. Because think of it, if you're taxed at a 35% tax bracket, which is on the low end of people in this community, to make a $100,000 investment, it really means you need to make 135. So you got the whole thing about the 4 pillars. You only invest in assets that you can use leverage, safe leverage, and that are tax advantages. It's the only way to get ahead. Now, this guy, Dave Ramsey, I think Dave Ramsey's great for people who are dealing with consumer debt. But people watching this video, people in this community, they're responsible. They've paid all their dues. They've done everything right. And so I don't know if you've ever played the cash flow game by Kiyosaki, but there's two circles in the game. And it's like when you graduate to a certain point, you're able to play by different rules. It's the same thing about this. When you're making enough money that you don't have any consumer debt, then new rules open up. Same thing happens in quantum physics versus, I'm not smart enough to remember the answer, but Newtonian physics to quantum physics. There's different rules. And it's the same thing with using leverage. And so historically, debt has been viewed as very good or very bad. Like in the Middle Ages, it was illegal to give people loans. So it's a very, this is a loaded topic. So I'm going to try to use this video to create some clarity. So there's different kinds of debts. I think this is the main revolution. The main thing people see when they start working with me and working in this program is that not all debt is the same. So you gotta look at debt based off 3 things. What is your risk of ruin to take on the debt? What is the recourse of the debt? And then finally, what is the interest rate? Interest rate is what you look at last. It's risk of ruin, and recourse is what you look at first. So recourse, what does that mean? It means what's the collateral you're giving up? So in this, what we're doing here, the collateral you give to take a loan is a house. I'm not asking people to take loans on their personal residence, so it's an investment property. It's the recourse, pretty solid. Some recourse, I'm going to go through different levels of debt, but some recourse can get pretty spicy. And remember, everybody wants to talk about their return on investment. Your return on investment is not important. What's important is, was there any risk of ruin? If you make 8%, it's in the anti-fragile video, which you'll see later in this course. But if you make 8% on it, this is how poor people invest. They're like, I made a 10% investment, but they put their whole portfolio, or they put a significant amount at risk. So let's say you have a $100,000 investment, to only make 8 to 10 grand, but potentially lose your entire investment doesn't make any sense. So this is from Nassim Taleb. It's from a great book called Anti-Fragile. But just remember, your return is irrelevant if risk of ruin is present. If you could lose it all, it doesn't matter what your return is. At that point, you're just gambling. So let's talk about the worst level of debt. And so when I first came up with this training, I called it levels of debt. So here's your worst level. This is Rocky. I'm sure if you remember the first Rocky, he would box, and he was a part-time leg breaker for a mob boss. That's why Mickey didn't like him in the beginning. So worst level of debt is a loan shark. Risk of ruin there. Physical injury and damage. But hey, the good news is doesn't show up on the credit report. But huge risk of ruin when dealing with loan shark. You don't pay them back. They could break your thumb, break your leg, do horrible things to you. So risk of ruin is huge. If you use money from a loan shark, I would not do it, no matter what the rate of return is. Recourse, in this example, physical injury or damage. Interest, then they have extraordinary interest rates as well. So level of debt, don't deal with the loan shark. Payday loans. Now, payday loans, people want to get into the morality of it. I don't want to touch that right now, but for some people who need fast access to cash, payday loans is a viable option. For people in this community, it's not. So payday loans do show up on your credit report, so you don't pay that back. There is, if you're already struggling being creditworthy, you don't pay a payday loan back, you're going to struggle even more. Recourse is personal. They can take back the original asset and go after other assets. So a lot of people for payday loans will leave the title to their car. I don't think they use the title of the house, but recourse is a car just to get some cash. Generally, a lot of times it's not worth it. And the interest is very high and compounding. So not as bad as Loan Shark, not as good as what we're getting into, but it's the payday loans and the credit cards and the loan sharks that give leverage a bad name. Now, consumer credit cards. I might have this book back here, but here it is. This is called The Richest Man in Babylon. The main takeaway from this book, and you haven't read it, this is like a beginning of wealth building, but you pay yourself first. That means you pay off all your consumer debt. You don't want to have a $10,000 vacation and really make it a $14,000 vacation because of interest. So you never, me personally, and I learned it from Richest Man in Babylon, this is what Dave Ramsey's talking about. You never use debt for consumption. And so consumer credit cards, risk of ruin is high. They have your credit report as a leverage that they can ding your credit report. And so that will make you completely unlendable for anything else. So high risk of ruin with consumer credit cards, not as high as a payday loan or loan shark, but still I would rate it as high. Personal recourse, they can just come after your personal assets and they can destroy your credit report. So they can come after your house. They can come after your car. They can. So, and then interest is high and compounding. So the next, I don't love consumer credit cards. The main takeaway I had to take when I first started investing is like, I don't borrow for consumption. I borrow for investment. So next level of debt is 0% interest credit cards. Now I know people in this community use this for their Berkeys, and that's fine as long as you know you can pay the debt off. So we're just going through levels of risk. I'm not saying never use it, but I am saying 0% interest credit cards, in my thought process, risk of ruin, lower, but there's still a personal guarantee. Some have personal guarantees, some don't. So some don't have personal recourse, some do, but they can come after your assets and destroy your credit reports. Generally, there's not personal recourse because these are tied to a business, but if you do not pay them back, they will come after your credit report and they will come after your personal assets. Once again, I know it starts with 0% interest, but like that, I've had this. I got caught not being able to refinance one of these, and after the teaser rate of 0 was over, they crushed me on interest. So next level, commercial bank loans. Now we're starting to get into the safe zone. These are loans that I have. These are loans that I recommend other people have. So low risk of ruin. They'll be in your credit report, but the bank will take away your asset, your rental property, but not your personal house. So risk of ruin is low on these commercial bank loans. Personal bank, you do have to sign a personal guarantee. So through different ways you have LLCs and trusts, it's hard for them to come after your personal assets, but possible. And then interest rate is prime or lower than prime. They do have balloons. So what a balloon means is you have a 5-year loan, maybe a 20-year amortization. So your payments are based on, you're going to have that loan for 20 years. But after 5 years at the balloon, we're going to say, hey, let's readjust the interest rate. Let's see what we're doing here. And so we're going to get into the safest loan, but I'll save that for a couple more slides. But there is risk on interest rate hikes after that balloon goes away. So generally, like I said, 3 to 5 years. Non-recourse commercial bank loans. These are hard to get. So low risk of ruins, but they require you to put like a 50% down payment. There is no risk to your personal assets or credit report. Recourse, the bank can only take the asset back if you don't sign a personal guarantee. And then the interest rate, generally the interest rate is slightly above market. So this is what I'm talking about. If I could get a non-recourse loan, I'll probably be willing to pay a higher interest rate because my risk of ruin is lower. I don't really care that much about the interest rate. Now, safest, the best leverage out there, conventional mortgages backed by real estate. I call these a middle-class welfare check because the high performers, the high income earners in this group, this is the only government subsidy you're ever going to get. So the government subsidizes really poor people, really wealthy people. People in the middle, this is the only subsidy they're going to get. Like in any free market, there would never be a 30-year fixed mortgage. No lender will lend money for 30 years unless it's government backed. So it's like, that's why I say you got to take advantage, get all these loans in you can get. So risk of ruin, it's very low because you have a fixed rate mortgage for 30 years. Like I said, no one in their right mind would make an amortization for 30 years unless it's government backed. So that fixed rate is huge. It can only go down. Recourse, there's personal recourse. You do have to sign you have to guarantee it personally, but the fixed rate for 30 years, it's free money when it comes down to inflation. So very low recourse, very low risk of ruin. And then the market, you're going to get the best interest rate with these 30-year fixed mortgages. And like, I'm adamant about this. It's your patriotic duty, if you are a high income earning American, to get at least 20 of these loans. Like, another way to look at what we do here is like, we just connect you with these mortgages, this debt, so that you can become you can build wealth. So this 30-year mortgage is pretty much how all of real estate works. It's definitely how this program works. So I'm going to give you guys an example. We'll talk about Warren Buffett's take on this. So this is one of my favorite videos from Warren Buffett. This is when I first saw this, it started making a ton of sense to me.
100,000 single family homes.
So he just said he'd buy a couple thousand single family homes.
And had a way of managing. The management is enormous. It was really a problem because they're one by one. They're not like apartment houses. So, but I would load up on them, and I would take mortgages out at very, very low rates.
Now, that's the glory of this program. We handle the management for you. I was like, man, if only, when I was first starting this, I saw this, like, if only we could figure out the management. So what did I do? I went about figuring out the management for you guys.
But if anybody is thinking about buying homes, 5 years ago, they couldn't buy them fast enough because they thought they were going to go up. And now they don't buy them because they think they're going to go down. And interest rates are far lower. It's a way, in effect, to short the dollar, because you can take a 30-year mortgage, and if it turns out your interest rate's too high next week, you refinance lower. And if it turns out it's too low, the other guy's stuck with it for 30 years.
So what's he mean by that? That means you buy the house, but you date the rate. So let's say you buy a house and you have a high interest rate. Who cares? Eventually, at some point, the rate will go down, and then you refinance. And what does he mean by stuck with it? Let's say you get a house that you have such a low interest rate, that bank, because it's 30-year fixed, that bank can't go back on it. It's like the best deal ever for you, and the bank is stuck with that paper that's not beautiful. And the only reason they do that is because it's government backed.
But it's a very attractive asset class now.
If you are a young individual investor at home and you have your choice between buying your first home or investing in stocks, where would you tell someone is the better bet?
If I thought I was going to live, if I knew where I was going to want to live the next 5 or 10 years, I would buy a home and I'd finance it with a 30-year mortgage, and it's a terrific deal. And if I was an investor that was a handy type, which I'm not, and I could buy a couple of them at distressed prices and find renters, I think that's and again, take a 30-year mortgage. It's a leveraged way of owning a very cheap asset now, and no,
So this is where we crack the nut. You don't have to be handy, because my team manages all this for you. This is what I love about. He just basically, that was the best sales pitch ever had for what we do. You don't have to be handy in order to open up these assets to your portfolio.
I think that's probably as attractive an investment as you can make.
And what he means by as attractive as investment as you can make it is you take 30-year fixed money. So no matter what, your interest payment and principal payment is going to be the same for 30 years. But what's going to happen in that time? The cash flow gap's going to open up. And so you're going to keep raising the rent, and that house is going to keep appreciating to at least keep pace with inflation. So it's like, if you look at a 10-year time frame, there's no way you didn't just get a cheap asset. So let's keep moving on. And so this is what I was talking about earlier. Most small bank commercial loans have a 3 to 5 year balloon, and it's amortized between 15 and 25 years. So that means your monthly payments are going to be higher for a 15 to 25 year payment. So here's just a lending principle that you always want to have is you want to extend your balloon for as long as possible. Right now, there's talk of a 40-year mortgage. If those come out, you would then get 40-year mortgages with the longest amortization. And so you also want the payments to get cut up amongst the longest time possible. Now, some of you might be saying, I want to get rid of this debt. I want to pay this off as soon as possible. I'd agree with you if we didn't live in an inflationary environment. And so here's how I do that for myself. I either have my houses completely paid off, and then generally I get a line of credit on them, or I have a maximally levered. And then you might be asking why. And it's outside the scope of this video, but the internal rate of return of your house goes down the more if you start paying the mortgage down early. It means you have more cash in the deal, but the same return. So never, ever pay your mortgages down early unless it's to completely pay it off and get that loan off your books. And so you got to think about it. The more you pay the house down early, the more attractive it is to the bank if something bad ever happens to you. So let's say you pay down a house early and you're like 5 payments left, but you lose your job. And you're like, hey, Mr. Banker, I can't pay you this month. You don't get any points for paying it down early. The banker will take all of that cash and the house with it. And so now we're going to move on to the next level of debt. And no, this is going to compete. It's going to be splitting hairs on what is a better level of debt, a private money or a 30-year fixed mortgage. Generally, you want private money for your BRRRRs and your flip keys and your creative deals because it is lower interest than hard money. So private loans, risk of ruin, none. It's non-recourse. The investor, the lender either gets what he gets. You either pay them their interest or you allow them to foreclose and you deed in lieu the house over to them. Recourse, they just take the house back. Interest rates, it's generally a little bit above market interest rates. Right now, I pay my private lenders and recommend people pay between 8 and 10. So now I'm going to move into putting the leverage to work and why leverage is so powerful. But if you're still nervous, think about it. Can you go to a banker and say, hey, I'd like you to lend me some money. Here is my 401k. Can I use this as collateral? All of the bankers will laugh at you because they know that 401ks, the stock market's inherently unstable and it's not a hard asset. People want hard assets as collateral. So real estate, you can go to any banker as long as you have a W-2 and a title to a house, and they will lend you money because real estate is an essentially safer asset. So now let's talk about why your rate of return is so accelerated with leverage. Think about it this way. So if you want to buy a $100,000 house and you're going to either pay cash or you're going to use leverage and do a 20% down payment for this example. So look at the column on the right. Your purchase price to buy a $100,000 house, $100,000, you need $100,000. Really, you need $135,000 if you're taxed at a 35% tax rate, but I'm not going to do that here. And then the house appreciates year one at 5%. So your year one appreciation is 5%. Now let's say you use leverage to buy that house. And so you put 20% down and the year one, once again, appreciation is 5%. The house goes up 5%, but you only have $20,000 into that deal. So your return is 25%. And now let's say you take that $100,000 and put it amongst 5 houses. Now your appreciation, you made $25,000 that year and you still have a 25% return. So leverage amplifies returns. Like I said, it's the only way to get ahead. But remember, just a cautionary tale, leverage is a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. So if you can't make the payments, then yes, you will lose your down payment and you could potentially lose your investment house. So what do we do to prepare for that risk? And later on in the course, you'll see a buyer's criteria and how to manage risk. You just got to balance it reserve. What I recommend people put $5,000 away for every rental house that you buy. Right now, you can get pretty good returns, decent returns in a savings account, but just put it aside where it's collecting interest. You can also use a whole life insurance policy, leave it there, but put it aside so if the tenant does move out, you're not freaking out. So like I said, keep $5,000 per rental house in an account. And so this may lower your cash on cash return, but remember, it protects your risk of ruin. And that's all we're really looking to do. And so that's what I got for you on leverage. Key takeaways from this one: leverage amplifies returns. The 30-year fixed mortgage. Like if you only join this program to get a hold of 20, 30-year fixed mortgages, that's all you need to do. So, all right, see you on the next video.